riots also, so this is not totally unconnected to Acts. After that moment, Paul, the enemy of the church, leaves off this destructive behavior and thinks that James is dead, and they leave the temple, but James's supporters find him and carry him out of the temple at night to his house in Jerusalem, James's house in Jerusalem. That will be important. All this, to some extent, has parallels, as we've said, in Acts in the Stephen episode, where Paul is involved supposedly in the attack on Stephen, and Stephen is stoned exactly like James. The Stephen episode being a compression, a conflation of these materials in Acts of the attack on James and the death of James are conflated into this Stephen episode in Acts. But you can read about that in both of my books. I don't have time to explain that to you, but you can see the elements of these things are in the Stephen attack. In any event, forget which is right, which is wrong, which is historical, which isn't historical. According to the account in the Pseudo-Clementine Recognitions, which is a very surprising account, particularly now that we found the Dead Sea Scrolls near Jericho, James spends the night in Jerusalem, and his followers, numbering 5,000 as usual, the number of Essenes, the number of people Jesus feeds in the Gospels, and so on and so forth, go down to Jericho en masse, which is something you don't find in the Gospels or in the book of Acts. Go down to Jericho en masse, and then because the enemy, it's not named, but it's clearly Paul, because he gets letters from the high priest to pursue the early Christian community to Damascus. So it's clearly supposed to be the same character that Acts is calling Paul. They just call him the man who was our enemy. And Paul admits, as you know, to persecuting the church even unto death at this period, so it's not too out of touch with that. It's just more detailed than what we get in Acts, which is probably, being a Pauline book, anxious to, if this is accurate, and we don't say it is, I'm just giving it to you, you're the judge, you're the jury. If this is accurate, Acts would be at pains to either bob it over, cover it up, rub it out, do something to lessen the terrible implications of it. But they carry James down to Jericho, and it turns out, as the chapter continues, he has a broken leg, or one or both his legs have been broken. Now that kind of accurate detail, the flight to Jericho, the one or both legs being broken, that seems, by the way, incorporated into the Jesus death scenario, where the soldiers go along and they say, break his legs so that he'll die on the cross, because the Jews don't want to leave people up on the cross past nightfall. So they broke his legs or someone. There's a correspondence in those themes one should look at. I don't have time to go into the exact meaning of the correspondence at this moment, just pointing it out to you. In any event, James broke one or both his legs. And we know that because they go outside of Jericho because the enemy is pursuing them through Jericho and then going on to Damascus. And he misses them because they've gone out somewhere outside of Jericho to visit the tombs, as I've told you, of two of the brothers who were remembered before God. There's that remembered before God, the usage we've been talking about in this class. And that miraculously whitened of themselves every year. And so they're paying a pilgrimage. So that site looks very much like where we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, you see, those people could not have imagined the importance of such a site prior to our having found these Dead Sea Scrolls, which is what I consider to be good indication of a kind of authenticity to this material that is often lacking elsewhere. I mean, that is extremely impressive. If that is Qumran, as we call the area of the scrolls type area, then that they went out to Qumran, or an area like Qumran, and the enemy, the man who was their enemy, missed them. That's really that to me satisfies the criteria of uniqueness, when something is so unique and surprising that you wouldn't have expected it. Where authenticity and historicity go. It's not a proof positive, but it certainly is something adds a good deal of weight. Well, the reason I'm talking about all this is that at the end of about a month there, James sends Peter out. James is the clear leader of the early church, which Acts has really not been anxious to reveal that, and it doesn't reveal that till about chapter 15. Paul makes it very clear in Galatians, and there's no doubt in it that James is the leader of the early church, not Peter. Now I know a believing person saying this is incredible to them. How come we've been told Peter is the leader of the early church from the time we were little children, and that Peter is the rock of the church, and Rome and so on is built on St. Peter's bones, and so on and so forth, that James was the leader of the early church? I don't have to answer that question. You have to answer that question. I don't have an answer for such a question, because the facts don't bear that out. And all Eastern manuscripts make it clear that James is the bishop of bishops. Peter is only an apostle, not the bishop of bishops. The bishop of bishops is the overseer leader of the early church. I can't help it. That's just the way it is. Now, I've had the honor of pointing this out on a worldwide basis. Before my work, very few people either were willing, or there was a school in Germany that for a while was emphasizing things like this in the 19th century. But I didn't get onto it until the Dead Sea Scrolls began to point me in that direction. And so I didn't take my inspiration from them. But fortunately, I've had the privilege of pointing this out, and it's become very widespread point of interest. That's all I can say. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. So you guys, and we did all that work here at Cal State Long Beach. So if anyone say, what do you do at Cal State Long Beach? We say, well, we do really important work here. More important work. Tell me what you've done at Harvard lately. Tell me what you've done at Notre Dame lately. Oh, well, I translated paragraph 2 of the Testament of Adam. Whoa, that's really very interesting what you did. But it really isn't anything earth-shattering or world-shattering. So if anyone tries to put down where you guys are, just spit that back to them, okay? And see if they can come up with anything more significant than what people have been doing here. Okay, so this so James sends out Peter from Jericho, from outside of Jericho, probably I would say Qumran, to Caesarea, and there he stays at the house of Zacchaeus, a Christian or a quasi-Christian or whatever this group should call itself in Caesarea. And Zacchaeus asks after James's health, and Peter says that he's still limping on one leg from the injury he took a month before from being thrown down the temple steps by the enemy Paul. Now, you see, that's really what I would call